Hello, everyone, and welcome to my presentation on industry trends. My name is Dean Coclin. I'm the Senior Director of Business Development here at DigiCert, and I also represent DigiCert on several industry standards bodies. So today I'm going to walk you through a presentation that I put together about what's going on in our industry and a little bit about what we're working on together in the CA Browser Forum and other industry standards bodies. Well, that's me. And I'll be presenting here for you for the next 30 minutes or so. Here's the agenda that I have. First, I'm going to show you some updated certificate market segment statistics, updates from the CAB forum. I'll tell you a little bit about a new group that has formed under the American Standards Committee X9, which is for the financial services group around PKI. You've probably already heard about the deprecation of 2-year certificates, and we'll talk a little bit about that and how we can help you. There's also a movement underway in the CA Browser Forum to remove the OU field from certificates, and that may affect some of you. We'll talk about certificate pinning and why it's a bad idea. And something that's really important is compliance, and I've got a lot of information to talk about there. Why automation is becoming increasingly important, and some updates on a new type of certificate called a verified mark certificate. So let's get right into it. This month, or I should say as of the end of October, Netcraft, which is an organization that goes out and surveys the internet, found 88 million TLS certificates worldwide. Now, these are publicly trusted TLS certificates. That is up about 400,000 certificates from last month. So we're continuing to see growth in this market. Since last year at this time, we've actually increased our population of certificates more than 4.4 million. And right now we have about 23.4 million active certs, where our nearest competitor, I should say commercial competitor, has 13 million certificates. So overall, we had a very good year and the market is continuing to grow. I'll get into some more details on that in a coming slide. When you look at the total share of certificates, it should be no surprise that Let's Encrypt, a free certificate authority offering free 3-month validity certificates, has the largest share of the market with almost 53%. But DigiCert is in second place and Sectigo is in third place. And then everybody else together, where you think about GlobalSign, Entrust, GoDaddy, etc., all of those companies together only make up less than 6% of the market. And there's that number at the bottom, the 88 million that I showed you on the previous slide. And as you know, we have 3 different types of certificates out there. We have DV, OV, and EV. DV, again, no surprise that that makes up the bulk of the market, given that that's the only type that Let's Encrypt issues. And other providers also offer free DV certificates, including DigiCert. So that makes up about 3/4 of the market. OV still makes up about 1/4 of the market, and then EV is less than 1/4 of 1%. Now, that may seem really low to you, but I think it's important to note that EV certificates still provide security for the highest traffic sites on the internet. When you think about merchants, financial institutions, they are still using, and as they should be, using EV certificates to show their identity to their customers. And most of that traffic on the internet is going through sites that use EV certificates. So this might be a little misleading in terms of the total number of certificates, but next time I'll put together a slide that shows the traffic, and I think you'll see a big difference. When you look at the certificate volume over time, look at the beginning of the last decade, the certificate numbers were well below 5 million per year. And then around 2016, things started to really pick up. And if you compare where we were at the end of 2019, it looks like about 50 million certificates. And right now we're at about 88 million, and the year is not over yet. So we see a big jump this year, probably the biggest jump we've seen in the last 5 years in the number of certificates being issued. Now, why is that? Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, browsers have started to put negative indicators for sites that don't use HTTPS. You may have experienced this if you were to go to a site on Firefox that did not use HTTPS it had a red line through the lock. Or if you were going to a site on Chrome or Safari, you would see the words "not secure" in the address bar. And nobody wants to see those words, or at least no site wants you to see those words. And so they're moving those sites to HTTPS. So that's driving the demand for additional certificates. In addition to that, we are seeing more and more opportunities in emerging markets like China, Brazil, South Korea, where there are increasing number of websites going online. Lastly, we're also seeing redundancy, failover, and other types of backup capabilities being introduced worldwide, where these sites need additional certificates to maintain their online presence. So I think we're going to see this continue to grow. I don't know if we'll see the exact same growth we saw this year, or maybe even more. It's hard to say, especially with COVID going on right now. But we'll wait and see, as I really don't like to make predictions in this area. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the CA Browser Forum. I think you should all be proud to know that DigiCert is well represented in the CA Browser Forum as leaders. I myself was just elected the chair for the next 2 years. Our own Stephen Davidson is chairing the SMIME working group. This is a new group that was formed this year to create standards for secure mail certificates. Our own Tim Hollebeek is also chairing the validation subcommittee. This is a very important subcommittee that talks about standards related to how certificates are validated. And I'm also chairing the code signing working group. This is the group that is working on standards for code signing certificates and improving those standards to decrease the amount of hackers that try to obtain these types of certificates. So we're well represented in the CA Browser Forum, probably more than any other certificate authority. And we're doing this not only for ourselves, but for you, our customers, to ensure your needs are met and your opinions are heard. So if you have opinions, if you have needs, if you have comments that you'd like to get to the CA Browser Forum, talk to one of us and we'd be happy to let the CA Browser Forum know about that. So I mentioned the SMIME working group. It's really gotten off on a great start with 26 certificate authorities, 4 application providers. These would be people like Microsoft Outlook or Mozilla Thunderbird applications that use SMIME certificates, several interested parties and other associated members. So these meetings have been great. They've been averaging about 20 to 25 people per meeting. There's a lot of good dialogue there. And the chair, Stephen, has set about the first task to create a certificate profile for SMIME. So they're inventorying the world of SMIME profiles to see what works best. And they're going to do some checking and validating of those profiles. And then they're going to implement a brand new profile for secure mail. And lastly, I think the biggest announcement at the last CAB Forum meeting was that Google Chrome has announced that they are going to have their own root store or root repository. In the past, Chrome relied on whatever operating system it was working on for their root repository. So if you were using Chrome on Windows, you use the Windows root store. If you were using Chrome on Apple products, you use the iOS root store. Not anymore. It looks like Chrome has developed their own root repository and will be going live with that sometime next year. These are 2 links that contain the policy as well as the initial proposed list of roots that will be included in Chrome. Now you'll be happy to see that DigiCert's roots are included in Chrome, as we would expect. So there should be no issue there going forward with Chrome. I mentioned earlier that there's a new study group formed as part of ASC X9. Now, X9 is the security standards body for the financial services community. So there are a ton of financial services companies as part of X9, banks, credit card companies, companies that make ATM and payment terminals are all members of X9. I am chairing, once again, a study group that is looking at developing a policy for the financial community. Now, why is the financial community developing its own policy? Quite frankly, they do not want to be under browser control. They do not want their industry to be controlled by what browsers dictate. So they've decided to create their own policy and their own certificate authority that will be used to issue certificates to the financial community. So for example, in the future, ATM terminals, or other types of payment devices may have certificates from this particular certificate authority, and they would not be subject to any browser rules. And I think this is a big advantage for the financial community who has their own needs going forward for their own infrastructure. We created a phase 1 report last year by inventorying all the specific needs of the financial community. And right now we are writing the certificate policy as part of phase 2. By now you've heard about the deprecation of 2-year certificates. This was a tough battle that was initially started in the CA browser forum, where the vote came down to continue to allow 2-year certificates, but Apple announced in February that they will no longer accept 2-year certificates as of September 1st, 2020. Now that date has come and gone now, so every CA has stopped issuing 2-year certificates. This rule does not affect any private certificates, but those still have to adhere to the 2-year rule or 825 days. There are no formal changes announced to the validation reuse. So we can still continue to reuse data, but it looks like the CA browser forum is going to make some changes in that particular area, because the browsers have basically said they want to shorten data reuse for a smaller period of time. We do have, or we've announced, a multi-year plan that can help manage and reduce your lifecycle costs. I think you can actually get certificate lifetimes up to 6 years, not for the actual certificate itself, but through a subscription program that we would manage that for you. And more information is available in our multi-year plan FAQ at the link below. The OU field, this is the organizational unit field. This is a field in X509 certificates. Some customers use this today. However, we have removed use of this field on August 31st, with some exceptions. We found that the vast majority of users that enter data here don't really use it. They just kind of put something in there, but they don't really use that information. However, there are some specific customers that did use that information to distinguish certificates, to say, okay, these certificates are for this application, these certificates are for our backup application, etc. Now, the CAB forum is making a lot of noise about removing the use of this certificate, primarily because it contains unvalidated data. And one of the tenets of the CAB forum is that anything in a certificate must be validated. Because this information is entered by a user, for example, in this case, it says IS, or it could say IT department. Sometimes it says Microsoft SharePoint server, and that could be misleading. And we're not able to validate that information. So this is why the CAB forum is saying, let's get rid of it. Now, there are ways to manage certificate distinctions without using the OU field. For example, the certificate serial number field is unique. So if you wanted to distinguish certificates, you can use the serial number field. Or you can use an extended validation certificate, which has more usable fields that you could use to distinguish the certificate. And lastly, in our Cert Central partner, you can create custom fields that can also be used to distinguish the certificate. So this is a very important thing that's happening in the CAB forum. DigiCert got out ahead of this, and we were recognized by Chrome, at least one person from Chrome, who said that this is the right thing to do, and this is the way we're going to go forward. Certificate pinning. This has been a very controversial area for quite a while. Quite a few years ago, people were suggesting to use certificate pinning as a way of as a security control. But what happened is many organizations found out that it's extremely difficult to implement, and if you don't do it right, you break your systems. And so now the recommendation is to stop certificate pinning. And our own Jeremy Rowley wrote a specific blog about this at the URL below, where you can read more about why certificate pinning is a bad idea and why you should stop doing it. So we are recommending that all organizations stop certificate pinning going forward. I'd like to talk a little bit about compliance and how important it is to the certificate authority industry. As you know, certificate authorities are trusted to validate information that you provide and only put validated information in the certificate. If invalidated information is found in the certificate, that certificate must be revoked. There are various reasons why a certificate must be revoked. Anything from a poor security key, invalid information, or something as minor as a misspelling of a city name. We have to acknowledge within 24 hours the receipt of a potential issue with a certificate. Then we have 5 days, not 5 business days, but 5 calendar days to revoke that certificate. And that means we have to investigate, notify the customer, and get a new certificate to them so that they do not interrupt their service. And if there's an issue with a sub-CA or an intermediate CA, we actually have 7 days to do that. These are rules that are ingrained in the CA Browser Forum baseline requirements. We are obligated to follow those rules. If we do not follow those rules, we must report that to the browsers, and they can decide on penalties, up to and including removal of our certificates. That would be a disaster. So we do not ever want to face that situation. Our compliance team has to look at a bunch of different requirements, not just the CA Browser Forum requirements, but also we are subject to the Web Trust rules, which is the AICPA, American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, rules around audits. In addition to that, the browsers all have their own root programs and rules. You just heard about Chrome creating their own root program, but Apple, Microsoft, Mozilla, 360 in China, and others have their own root program rules. On top of that, we have internal regulations that we have to follow. Think about payment services, PCI, or SOC for data centers. All of these things have to be followed, and therefore our compliance team is charged with making sure we're following these rules. But it's not just the compliance team's job to ensure we're following these rules. It's actually everybody's responsibility. So if you see something that looks odd, maybe it's out of compliance, or maybe you just have a question about it, please contact us and let us know so we can investigate it. We are extremely interested in learning about things like this so we can improve our systems and make sure we don't misissue any certificates. So whether you see something major or minor, please bring it to the attention of your account manager or to one of us so that we can look into it. There is a blog, again, that we've written. We like to write a lot of these blogs to help you understand these in more detail. And so there's a blog called A Guide to TLS Certificate Revocations on our website. If you just go to digicert.com/blog, you'll find a list of these blogs that you can search and get a lot more information for what you're looking for. So because certificate validity periods continue to shrink, we are seeing a great need for automation in industries and in companies. So browsers are pushing for shorter validity periods. You heard about the 1-year reduction. That is not the end game. They're going to continue to reduce validity periods. They would like to go to 9 months next, and then 6 months, and eventually 3 months. So it's going to be impossible to manage your certificate inventory if certificate validities are at 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, using old-fashioned tools like Excel spreadsheets and alerts to your calendar. That is not going to work for large organizations. So you need to implement automation tools. Compliance is a major concern. So if some certificate is found to be out of compliance and it needs to be revoked, the easiest way to do that is with automation tools. The public is scrutinizing certificate transparency logs. These are logs that contain every certificate issued. So they can go through these logs with tools to check for compliance. And if they find something, they're going to report it. And then we've got 5 days to revoke that certificate. And agility is a much greater requirement these days because as certificate lifetimes change, as new security protocols come about, it will become very important to have an agile infrastructure to replace your certificates. What were common practices in the past are not considered best practices anymore. So practices have changed and we need to keep up with those changes. And I think the mantra for the next few years is going to be automate, automate, automate. Everyone's going to need to do that. This is going to mean changes in your infrastructure, but the good news is that DigiCert has automation tools to help you in this area. So please speak to your account manager about this. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to help you. Okay, I'm going to transition to our last topic, which is verified mark certificates. Now, I'm not sure if you've heard about verified mark certificates, but these are certificates that will actually allow your logo to be displayed in the customer's inbox. So if you see the example on the left, you don't see logos, but then on the right, you actually see the logo of the entity that is sending you the message. And this is actually implemented right now in a Australian provider called Fastmail. So if you have a Fastmail account and you would like to see how this looks, DigiCert is actually enabled. So ask a DigiCert colleague to send you an email to your Fastmail account, and you'll see, just like on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, the DigiCert logo. Now, there was a big pilot with Gmail underway right now with about 50 hand-selected participants from Gmail. And we expect this pilot to continue into early 2021, after which time this will go to general availability. These dates are not set. Gmail has not announced anything. This is just my guess. So this could change at any moment, but we expect at some point Gmail will implement verified mark certificates throughout its environment, and it'll be a great opportunity for organizations to show their logo to their customers. Now, the exact pricing of verified mark certificates has not been determined yet because there are still some challenges going on in the validation space. So I would use the EV SSL prices as a guide. These will probably be valid for 1 or 2 years. Again, that's not quite determined yet. In order to get a verified mark certificate, you have to have a DMARC policy of reject or quarantine. You cannot have a DMARC policy of none. So first of all, you need a DMARC policy. Second of all, it has to be at reject or quarantine. So if you're thinking about getting a verified mark certificate, if your marketing department is going to start knocking on your door and asking your IT folks to get a verified mark certificate, start getting ready by getting your DMARC policy enforced. You also must have a registered logo with the trademark office. So if you have a logo and it's not registered, you will not be able to get a verified mark certificate. Make sure your logo is registered. And I'm going to show you a slide on the next screen with which trademark agencies are allowed right now. There's a great implementation guide on bimigroup.org that'll give you some of the steps necessary to implement VMCs, including creating your BIMI record in your DNS and updating your DMARC record. If you are interested in VMCs, I would ask that you register your interest on this page, digicert.com/VMC, where we have more information on the offering. And at the bottom, you can sign up and you'll be one of the first to know when VMCs are available for sale. So please go to this URL, sign up your interest. And as I said, we will let you know, and we're actually going to keep you informed over the next few months as we develop more information about VMCs. And speaking of more information, we actually created 3 blogs that help you get ready for VMCs. One is how to set up your DMARC. Another one is prepping your logo, because the logo has to be in a specified SVG format. And then how to trademark your logo if it's not trademarked already. The organizations below are the 7 intellectual property offices where VMCs are currently recognized, or excuse me, trademarks are recognized for VMCs. So you have to register it into one of these trademark offices in order to get a VMC when they do come out. So this is very exciting. I think it's a new opportunity, a totally different use of certificates than we've seen in the past. And it's going to be an opportunity to get your logo in front of your customers every time they open an email. So that's my presentation for today. I feel bad that we weren't able to see each other in person, one-on-one, to interact as we usually do. But hopefully things will improve next year with this virus and with the vaccines. I'm very hopeful that we'll have an opportunity to get together again in the future. And I look forward to seeing you then. So thank you very much and enjoy your day.